we're live. So that's really cool. Yeah. So you were just saying about the lockdown. So we've been here, I think, in Belgium. We've been on lockdown for 4 weeks or so, and we only go out to walk the dog, and it's like really. It's quite funny because like you go out and now suddenly you're super aware of everyone and like
Yeah,
I feel like I step out and I'm like calculating distances and people and how
yeah.
far they are and am I crossing the
Stay
road?
away from me.
Yeah, there's let me see. There's a bit of an issue on Twitch. Yeah, no, we're cool. Cool. So, is it Sean or Swyx? Which one do you prefer?
Both. I go by either,
Okay.
whatever makes people comfortable. So Swix is just my initials, because I have an English and Chinese name.
Yeah.
So that's the origin of the name.
Yeah, I like I found it really hard to remember your name. Like I kept thinking like it's something like the South by Southwest or the musical thing, and then like when I heard you pronounce it, I was like, ah, Swyx. I can remember that. Okay, so Swyx then.
There's also a German company that has Swix.com, and but I have the Twitter at Swix, so we're just fighting. And someday, either they'll buy me or vice versa.
We'll see. But yeah, so Swyx, thank you so much for agreeing to come to the Twitch stream. We are here. We're going to be talking about your kind of like the journey, what you're up to, but also I'm interested to talk about um, note taking and how you learn and how you share your progress with the community. But so to start with, maybe could you just do like a brief introduction about like who you are and what you do?
Yeah, cool. So I'm calling. We're speaking to you. I'm actually here in Singapore. I'm originally from Singapore. I originally started as in my career in finance, but then eventually burned out of finance and then switched to tech about 3 years ago. And spent a bunch of time learning JavaScript and web dev and all that good stuff. Did a boot camp, had my first job in Netlify. Had my first job at Two Sigma, and then joined Netlify, and that was where I most recently was. I left Netlify about a month ago, which seems like a bad time to leave a company, but
Yeah.
I do have another company up. Um, I guess that hopefully I will be. I mean, I was supposed to start the company already, but
Yeah.
everything has been delayed, especially with visas.
Yeah.
So right now I'm actually writing a book because I'm unemployed, and I figured I might as well just give my hand at trying to write a book. So the core idea is that there's not that much career advice for early career people, and because it's hard.
Yeah.
But basically, I basically just completed the journey, right? I went from learning to code web development
Yeah.
um, through like a junior dev phase, and then I just got hired as a senior dev. So I figured I would just write a book about that journey and then share some thoughts with other people who are going through. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but I figured, why not try?
I mean, I feel like you are a little bit of an expert because just to go from the whole getting your first job as a developer to senior developer in what like 3 years or something like that. That is
Yeah,
quite that is quite an accomplishment, I think. So
yeah, thanks.
yeah, but like
um,
so the main reason for you like to kind of like switch careers was burnout or what was your main reason?
Yeah, burnout. Like basically, I didn't feel like I was. I mean, there's the long version, and then the long version is that finance was very high stress. I was in a hedge fund, and we were a 3-person team running $1 billion in asset allocation. So essentially, when you're a hedge fund, everything's levered, and also so we were market neutral long short. So you're long 500 million of some stocks, which means you own that stock, and then you're short, hopefully the same amount.
Right.
And so that when the market goes up or down, you're theoretically not affected. Obviously, there's a lot of nuances to that, but the whole idea was that it was a lot of money to be running when you're like 20 something,
Yeah.
and so basically like you're as an analyst, you're responsible for your stocks, and then 4 times a year they report their financials, and then the earnings will jump or fall, and hopefully you're the correct way on one of those things. And there's other ways to bet on these things, but those are like the main ways that you do it. And it was just like a really high stress job. Like
Yeah.
you could basically have your entire year determined by one single trade. And so I found myself like sleeping under the desk. It was very high paid, but then
Yeah.
you're just like there's just no time to even enjoy life a little bit. And so I just and basically I reached a moment where I was like I could die at this job and no one would care, and I don't think I'm doing that great. Like I was working really hard, but then I was like kind of middle. I was average among all the analysts in the firm, and I was like I will never be one of the top people. I don't think this is working out for me. So that's kind of how I decided to leave.
And like so did you have like any background in tech, or how did you decide to go for the developer route?
I didn't have a CS degree. Actually, I didn't. So I didn't leave immediately. So that was actually like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I didn't. Yeah, no CS degree, no background in that. But obviously I've like dabbled in coding. I actually had to learn. So when you start in finance, you simply start like Excel, right?
Yeah.
And then Excel is like not typically not good enough. So you have to learn VBA to extend your Excel skills and automate some things in Excel. And then VBA starts crashing, or like your Excel sheets get too big and they lock up. So then you have to move everything to Python. And then from Python, I spent 2 years at an investment bank that forced that only used Haskell. So I was forced to learn Haskell.
Nice.
So all of these, like I was not a developer. I was just forced to like copy and paste bits of code, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the main issue with all of these things was that when I was coding them, um, I would like execute a script. I'll do calculations, and then my boss or my portfolio manager would see the results, and then they'll say, all right, how about if you change X, Y, and Z, and then I was to go back and recalculate. So basically, I was the bottleneck. I had to be the guy like pushing the scripts, configuring the things, and all that. And I realized that's not very scalable, and really you need to start building user interfaces,
Yeah.
so that people can do things themselves. And so then I started looking into web development, and that was actually way harder than anything I did before, because in all the other environments, it's kind of integrated. Like Excel has a visual layer already, right? So if you use VBA and you update something, you update a cell and it just updates.
Yeah.
There's no CSS. There's no like there's no TypeScript or whatever. Like there's a lot of simplicity, because you're operating within an environment that's set up from front to back with the same vision in mind. Whereas the web is a lot more complicated. So essentially, I started like I didn't decide that I was a programmer and just leave to go into coding. So essentially, what I did was I was like, I have a finance background, and I don't want to do that, but I want to do something adjacent. So I actually became a product manager for a fintech
Right.
SaaS product that I was a customer of. So I changed from a customer to an employee, basically by asking the CEO when he visited our office. And so that was a pretty easy transition. So I spent a year there, and so it was a non-technical role, right? Like
Right.
I was just like collecting projects and talking to customers and stuff like that, and trying to get developers to do stuff. And the real realization was that I should go into to coding was that we had 60 developers in the company, and only 2 of them were good.
Yikes.
And the whole company was waiting, like whenever to get anything done, the whole company was basically waiting on one of them to get to who knew everything in the system.
Yeah.
And who could do things fast and in the way that we product managers and customers wanted. And I was like, oh, the product is not the bottleneck. I'm not adding any value here, because all I'm doing is I'm trying to get in line and hopefully get this developer's time, and all the other devs are kind of not really delivering for us.
Right.
I mean, that's obviously that's a problem for engineering management, right? But I didn't really understand that at the time. All I knew was like they had 60 devs. I'd speak to them, some of them, and the other context with this was it was a remote office. We were in the U.S. as doing sales and products, and then the dev office was in India. So like time zones are difficult. Like language and cultural context was difficult.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, there was only two devs that we found that we could work with. And so I was like, okay, product is not a bottleneck and dev is the bottleneck, and I might as well learn to do this myself.
Wow.
So that was 2017, which was the first half was just me doing free code camp in nights and weekends every day.
So you were working full time and doing free code camp challenges in the
Yeah.
And how come? So why free code camp? Because there's like tons of resources. A lot of them are free.
Yeah.
But why free code camp?
Yeah. Basically, I was so I wasn't sure if I was going to make a career out of it, right? So I wanted to do something for free so that I didn't pay for it.
Obviously.
I looked around, and I think there were only a few projects that were like that. So there was Harvard CS50. There was Odin project, which is like the Ruby one.
Yeah.
And then there's Free Code Camp. Those are the main things in my consideration set. Obviously, there's more. There's like Treehouse and whatever.
But Treehouse I don't think it's free. Maybe
there's definitely more, but those are the main things that I was aware of. I tried CS50 for a while,
and
but then it was just like a lot of like they just went straight into PHP, installing like lamp stack stuff, and then I just like lost interest. So I was like, okay, I'll give this another shot, and so I just gave Free Code Camp a try, and it just like worked out of the box, and it's very smooth progression. Like they don't drop you in the deep end straight away, and so I found that much more approachable. And I was going to try Odin project if Free Code Camp didn't fail, but I never got there. So I happened to choose Free Code Camp before Odin project.
But
I hear good things about them.
So you were looking more for like a curriculum, not just like a single course, right? Like not, because there's also Udemy, there's Code Academy, but I feel like those are just, okay, learn this, but there's no, because I also did Free Code Camp, perhaps mic closer to you. Oh, okay, I think we have, people are saying that I'm talking a little bit quietly. Is this, let me know if this is any better, the Twitch audience. Because I also did a Free Code Camp, and I still really recommend it to a lot of people, especially like even people that are not necessarily into front-end development, just because it's a really nice kind of dive into beginnings of programming. And I think as a beginner, you got a lot of joy from doing, like front-end stuff, because you can see the changes in HTML and CSS. But I really like how structured they are, how they have certificates, and there's like people that actually use those certificates to apply for jobs, and obviously the whole open source aspect, and the whole, because like the first meetup that I organized was also a Free Code Camp, like study session, let's solve these challenges together thing. So I really love the community. So you did Free Code Camp for 6 months, let's say, or something like that, and what was the next step?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, boom, on the dot. And then?
The goal was to try to get to some point where I could be hired for my dev skills. And I finished, so Free Code Camp has three, at the time, Free Code Camp had 3 certifications. It's like front end, data
visualization
or
something,
and then back end. So I finished all those things, and then but like the problem with Free Code Camp is that nobody checks your work. I was definitely not, I was cheating basically. I was like copy and pasting code. And then I didn't feel good about my work. I didn't feel confident with like React and Webpack and all that. I didn't feel like I knew JavaScript well enough. Like the main goal, at the time, the main metric in my head was like for whether I learned anything was that could I write jQuery from scratch? I was very keen on this idea of like I will know I will feel like I know JavaScript once I can write jQuery from scratch. And I definitely did not.
Yeah.
Like I was just like messing around and like not really knowing like function binding and all that.
Yeah.
So basically I just didn't feel confident. I don't know if it was to this day I still don't know if it's like imposter syndrome. Like maybe I should have just gone out and applied for jobs, and maybe I would have got something. But I just didn't feel confident enough to even apply. So what I did was I was like, okay, I think I'm sure that I want to do this.
Nice.
But I'm still not good enough to do this for to start applying for a job. So essentially, what I decided was that I should do a boot camp um, instead. So I should quit my job and do a boot camp.
Right.
And then obviously that's a big decision because I lose my income and I'm paying income.
Yeah.
For however long it takes.
Yeah.
In the end, it took about 6 months as well. So something like January to June, free code camp, and then July to end of the year was boot camp plus essentially like extra training and learning and applying for the job. And then January the next year, I started at my first dev job.
Okay, so before we get into that, when you said at that point I was sort of sure that this was what I wanted to do, how did you know that? Like, because as a beginner and as someone that has been self-teaching and like you don't necessarily get a lot of validation or paid work, so how do you know like that's because it has to not only be an interest but it also has to be something that pays the bills. So how do you know like how did you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think I just like had a gut feeling that I would like it.
Yeah.
I looked at the people that were in the community. I was mostly on Reddit at the time.
Yeah.
And I thought that people were successful. They were making money. They were making good money. That I could be one of them. And that was it. You have to kind of take a leap of faith, right? Yeah. And so quitting your job to do that, like I knew my fallback wasn't too bad. Like I could always go back into finance and get like a less powerful, less stressful job. For example, in banking, like I know how to do the banking stuff easily. In fact, I left. I was doing very well in banking before I left for hedge funds, and then hedge funds stressed me out, and then I just left. Maybe I should have just gone back to banking. I don't know. So I definitely knew I could go back to banking if everything else failed. I just didn't really want to because it was kind of boring and not fun. So yeah, so my downside wasn't too bad, and I thought that I should take a risk.
And how did you know like that you were good at it, or
I didn't know.
You didn't.
I was not good. Yeah. No, seriously, like I would like run into problems and then just give up on the whole project.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that, and that's why I decided to do the bootcamp, even though I wasn't a beginner anymore, right? Because I did 6 months of free code camp and I finished the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I get that. Because that also
I found that I did really well during the bootcamp because I wasn't encountering all these things for the first time. I was encountering these things for the second time, and I was able to notice all the things I missed the first time around. Yeah. So essentially, I was like doing 2 bootcamps, right? And when you do that, that's you really notice you have time the second time around to like explore and to explain yourself, and you're like, I remember this works, but I don't know why. But now you actually have time to figure it out.
And I think that's something that, especially as adult learners, it's something that obviously maybe like our memory doesn't work the same way as it did when we were younger, but I feel as adult learners we learn really effectively from different contexts. So for me as well, like learning the same thing but from different resources or different environments or different things, like you just pick up different things at the same time. So I think that totally it makes sense. And
I'm curious about you. Like, did you go from free code camp straight into a dev job?
So my career path is a bit different. So my background is in languages. So I studied Mandarin, Chinese, and English. Lived in China for quite a while, and then I worked in an e-commerce in the UK. And then I didn't quite enjoy it because it was just like it was crazy and like November, December, January it was just insane and I didn't like it. But I was just out of like there was a couple of things in my work that were really boring and I was looking to how to automate them. So that's how I encountered like really basic, I don't know, like Python automatization, tiny scripts.
Oh, you had the same journey as me. Yeah.
um,
You see, like people when I say people when I tell people that I knew Python before I started web dev, they were like, "Oh, you already knew how to code." It's
yeah,
like,
no. Like I went and like copied a script or two, and I was like, yes, it kind of works. And then I went to Django Girls, which is like a one-day workshop on
Oh yeah,
web
yeah.
development and Django, and like it's insane. But like you get the idea of I can write this HTML, CSS, and then there's like this server, and it can go live and database, and it was just wow. And then from then, so I was still working at that time, and then we organized one, and I got to meet like a lot of coaches and volunteers, and I really liked the community. And then I just quit my job, and because I have a wife that also works, and was like, yeah, you can do this. Like, I'll give you a year, but after a year, if you don't start making money, we'll have to have a conversation. So then I quit my job, and I started. Like when you're a beginner, you don't really know. So I was like jumping from different resources, but I ended up on Free Code Camp because I appreciated the whole like tiny tasks and like point system and like you see what you've done and there's kind of like structure so you don't feel like this is a huge sea of things and I will never finish it. Instead everyone says okay, in 300 hours if you do this, you can call yourself a web designer or something. So that was more manageable to me because I feel like as a beginner you need this kind of like a context that there's a finite, I mean it's not finite but like once you learn this, you will know enough to do this or call yourself that.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of that. And I also did something called Watch and Code, which is, or there's like a free course called Practical JavaScript. And that one is, so now it has like kind of like a almost cultish following because it's very serious and very strict and there's like daily meetings with other students, so it's not free, but I really like the approach. So it's like don't go for fancy frameworks, don't worry about React, like learn vanilla JavaScript. I think there's like we have to do like a lot of jQuery stuff and how would you write this function not in jQuery but like use vanilla JavaScript to do the same thing. Yes, it's verbose but you'll learn a lot. So I did that, and then I did 2 internships, one with the Rails Girls Summer of Code and one with Mozilla through Outreachy. And now I work full time. For the last 8 months, I've been working as a front end developer. I work remotely. I do a lot of Reacty stuff. Yeah, and it's really cool. I love it. It's very hard. I like every day is like, like you feel super smart and you feel super stupid in the span of 15 minutes. Because like you solve something, but then you make like a stupid, like I should know better. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's but yeah, and I also spend quite a lot of time just telling other people that they can do it. So I had a couple of initiatives for like to get more women in tech and like because I quit my job when I was 30, and people would say,
Oh, same.
yeah,
Same.
right, samesies. So it's like it's not too late, and it's not you don't have to be like a genius. Like I'm not a genius. I'm not even good at math, or like I don't know why people say you have to be good at math. It helps obviously to be good at things, but yeah. So I just like preach the whole like consistency, discipline stuff. But yeah, like speaking of that, so why I know you from Twitter, and I know you mostly from. And this is funny because I just read your blog about marketing, and it says like be that guy, like be a guy. So you're a guy.
I know. I don't like that. That's why you see me put the quotes right around every time I use because I don't mean be a male. I mean like be a resource or I don't know. But like resource is not as nice as
No.
I don't know. So I don't like that term. But the concept is correct, right? Like.
Right.
Be a resource that everybody knows about.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole learn in public thing. How did that come about, and
Um,
what do you feel about it? But yeah, there's a
I
question.
want
We
to I
should,
want to check. Yeah, I
yeah,
want to check something. Yeah. Do you want to answer questions as we go, or do you want to
yeah,
leave
yeah.
it to the end, or how do you?
We can answer them. So in terms of availability of jobs, am I right to think there's a high demand for developers? Is the sector particularly resilient in times like now with COVID? So, because
So
you just been on a job hunting journey. So what's your feeling?
no, I mean, I got super lucky. I started my job hunt in January and I finished it in March, just before everything shut down, right? I literally I signed the paperwork and then everything died. So so I definitely got lucky. I think things have definitely changed.
Yeah,
I think obviously our industry is more resilient than others,
yeah,
and actually I was hoping that um, it wouldn't be too bad for the tech sector. But people got laid off very quickly, especially even among my friends who are web devs and who I went through bootcamp with and people I know on Twitter, um, because revenue of companies is gone and they have to keep their costs down and unfortunately there's not that much business anymore, so they have to let people go, and that's just the rough of it. There are people still hiring, especially yeah, there's still people hiring. In fact, there's some tech companies. Tech companies are pretty much the only ones in this whole thing that are some that have some of them going up.
yeah,
Like other companies, like, if you're in a restaurant, you're in a bank, I don't know, whatever, everything's going down, like
yeah,
stock market's down, whatever. But in tech companies, like for Zoom or for if you're on Slack or
yeah.
whatever, like there's more work to do, right?
Right.
And they have to ship more products, and they're hiring for that. So there's some I would say the job market, like some companies have been very negatively affected and they have laid off people and they're definitely not hiring, and then some others are more busy than ever, by a lot.
Yeah.
And just because they were lucky enough to be in the right industry, right products, right industry, like supporting remote work, whatever, and those are up and they're hiring. So I actually want to refer people to like this dev to. So my friend Nader compiled this list of 100 companies that are still hiring.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I want to drop that link.
Nice.
So I'm gonna DM it to you, or do you know do you know how to find it?
You
So
can just
I dropped it to you on the Twitter DM.
okay.
You can drop it in the chat. But yeah, these are all the companies that are still hiring. People still want talented developers.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that because there have been developers that have been laid off, there will be more applicants for each role, right?
Yeah.
Like it used to be a job. It used to be a job seekers market. Like
Yeah.
basically, you have multiple companies for every job seeker, but now it's the reverse. Now you have multiple job seekers for every company, and unfortunately, that's just the case. And especially if you're new to the
Yes.
industry, like you will have less years of experience compared to someone who was recently fired, and is looking for the next gig. And so those are the dynamics, right? Like it's just facts. It's unfortunate. But there are still people hiring, and there's still people hiring junior engineers. It's just you got to be aware that the economy has really changed in the past month.
Yeah. So if you were, let's say that you just graduate. So if we go back like 2.5 years, if you just graduated from your bootcamp, did not have your first job yet, and you found yourself in today's market, how would you go about looking for a job right now? And
I don't
you
know.
don't have your Twitter followers, you don't have a network, you don't
Yeah,
have.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's a difficult question. Yes.
It's a difficult question. I think if there are internship places, like you said, like you did the outreachy.io thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'll definitely look at that. I definitely look at, because like your main problem is not that there are no jobs. Your main problem is that you have no experience. So you haven't been proven to be an engineer. Um, so your main problem is to get experience, and really you just need it from anywhere. Just someone who can say that like, yep, I've coded with this person and I enjoyed this codes, so you can get the next job and the next job and the next job. Once you have one or two jobs under your belt, then you're a proven engineer and you're in a lot more demand. It's just like the 0 to 1 stage, like zero experience to 1 year experience. I think that's a very tough. That's probably the last time that you really struggle to find a job as an engineer. Okay, so then yeah, you do an internship. But like if I would, so one piece of advice that I'm giving to people now is that like go apply for developer jobs, but obviously don't be surprised if you have a difficult time.
Yeah.
And if like time is of the essence, right? You can't do this for a year and like get no jobs. In fact, if you're like not getting any success for like 2 months, I would suggest switching your mentality and applying for non-technical roles or like developer adjacent roles. So especially like support engineer is a good title, where they want you to be somewhat technical, but then you're not coding. You're doing support help for companies, right? And people still hiring for that. In fact, I just helped a friend get hired for a support engineer role. The thing about once you're in a company, right, they'll hire you for a job, and then once you arrive at the job, you like know the basics of your main job, and then you offer to do free coding help for people. They never say no. So then you just like start being a dev inside the company, even though you're not really a dev. And then after like a year, and you just say like, hey, can I change my job title? They're like, yeah, okay, sure. This always happens. Like I had people in my previous job do that. Like the job before that also did that. Like it's just a back door, right? Because it's just harder to get hired than it is in any job than it is to transfer within the company. So especially if like the company has a track record of doing this kind of transfer, that's a very strong company to join. And yeah, that would be the way I do it nowadays.
Okay. And you mentioned Reddit. So you are one of the moderators on the ReactJS subreddit, right? So how did that
I used to be super active, and recently I stepped down from the active mod role, mainly because I wanted to focus on other things. But I served for 2 years as essentially the most active mod.
And how was the experience like? Was it useful for you? Was it like, what did you learn from it?
Oh yeah, it was useful. I enjoyed it. I just enjoyed it. Like I met a bunch of people that I enjoyed arguing and debating with. It surfaces a lot of interesting projects, and you have to answer questions. So like I started the Q&A on Reddit, where we answer every single question that comes in. And you really get to prove yourself and expand your knowledge when you are forced to answer every question. It's kind of like going on Stack Overflow and answering people's questions, right? Like you learn at a faster rate than you would on your own because you just come up with more questions that you didn't really think about. But then you also get to see other people's projects, and then you get to look at their code and then talk to them a little bit. It's just really nice. Like I think there's a lot of I mean, there's a lot of toxic elements on Reddit, right? Like it's anonymous and people can like just throw hate at you, and they don't really feel the repercussions. But there's also a lot of nice people.
Yeah.
So I'm there for them, and I was trying to make a better community for them. I think we grew the community from like 40,000 to I think now it's like 180,000.
Nice.
So it's also like a question of like scaling a large community and making sure it's a welcoming place for beginners and advanced people as well. I actually find it more difficult to keep advanced people around because there's a lot more beginners just numerically. So I was trying to balance the content and encourage a wide variety of content as well. It's difficult. Like there's only so much you can do within the platform, which sets up the rules. And the rules, unfortunately, I mean, and the nature of the platform is that like the first link gets like 10 times the views of the second link, which gets 10 times the views of the third link, and so on and so forth. So it's a positional thing. Like it doesn't, it really depends on people going through the new posts and upvoting and all that. So it's kind of like a weird system, but I don't know. I think it's one of the most successful online communities out there, and so it was a good experience for sure.
Yeah. Cool. And so speaking of accelerated learning, so you're quite. So I know you're from your writing on note taking and the second brain thing. So how is your process right now? Like so for learning and for writing, what kind of processes do you have established?
Yeah, the way I am now is a little bit different from where I was like a year ago and 2 years ago.
Yeah.
What I'm doing now is kind of more knowledge management. I know it's a stupid term, but that's what he's teaching. I'm going through this second building a second brain course from Tiago Forte, and essentially he's like trying to preach this like note taking system for everything that you ever consume. Like so, not just tech, but like your life,
Yeah.
right? And in project management for your life. And also just like stuff that you read. And I mean the whole idea is sound is that your brain is not like my memory is terrible, right? Like I don't remember what I did yesterday. I do, but um,
Yeah.
it's like machines are really good at storing things, and you
Yeah.
should just use that as much as possible. And it's machines are very good at searching things and organizing things, and your brain should be just used for creativity and you know, like applying your analysis to situations, and like the stuff that you can't teach a machine to do, you should do, right? And then everything else you should offload to a machine, and that's the whole idea of a second brain. So I've been collecting all these notes. I've been trying to write more this year. I was on a writing streak of like one blog post a day. I
Nice.
stopped that to do this book. Um, but essentially like just writing down everything that's interesting. Like I would watch a technical talk, and then if it was a good talk, I'll probably come up with like two ideas of blog posts to write about. And it's the whole idea of this. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Let's it's kind of related to this learning public thing,
Yeah.
which is like you really learn once you start. Um, you learn faster. Like I'm not like most people learn, and you learn in private, and you just like stick it in your head, and you hope that it stays there. So the first thing to do is instead of trying to rely on memory, rely on an external memory, right, and put it down somewhere, and then that's the first thing. And then the second thing is like since you already put it down, you might as well open it up to other people, right? And so that's the idea, like that. And you can open source knowledge and all that,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is the talk that we talked about. Um, and the way that I mean the reason that increases the pace of your learning is that because you are now forced to explain it to other people,
Right.
right? So you're a little bit you're teaching, but even if like nobody follows you, just the act of going through it helps you remember it better and learn from it better. Um, Much more than passively just watching or reading things, and then once you're done, you close the tab and you move on with your life. That's not really internalizing the thing, right? Like uh, that's the rough thesis. And then so once you put something out there, and you get something wrong, people will correct you because that's how the internet works.
Yes.
Um,
Even if you're right, I
and then
think.
but like the thing that you got wrong is probably something important, right? Like they won't correct you for unimportant things. So they might, but like they'll correct you on what they think is important.
Yeah.
You just like get this sense of like, and whatever it is, if you've been publicly wrong on something, you would just remember it for the rest of your life.
For sure.
Like there's no chance you'll ever forget that, right? Like it's just so embarrassing. But like if you have a small ego, like I always say like you can learn so much on the internet for the low price of your ego, right? It's like, do you want to learn, or do you want to feel good about yourself? Like obviously you should try to feel good about yourself. but you shouldn't attach your self-worth and your identity to your work. Like your work is just you at a point in time, right? That's like the moment you put it out, that's past you, and you should be trying to be better than that, and you should be trying to look for the flaws in that, right? And if someone helps you to find the flaws, great. So that's the whole idea of like learning in public. And then there's other stuff as well. Like you're obviously helping yourself in future. Like let's say like you put up a note somewhere, and then like now when I Google stuff, I'll find my own blog posts on that, and I'm helping my future self, right? But then you're also helping other beginners who are like, a little bit behind you.
Yeah.
And then you're also helping people who know more than you, because you're helping them explain things to beginners. Like you have the beginner mindset. You are not an expert, but you're helping them see like how to explain things to a recent from a recent beginner point of view, and that's really helpful, especially like once you have a good reputation for like summarizing and sharing things. People know people who are more advanced with you will reach out to work with you, because they know that working with you also means that you will help expand their message to all the other people that they want to reach.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Because so I used to do, like, I've been like learning and studying for a very long time. Because especially when you study foreign languages, like repetition. So I did a lot of like Anki, flashcard, like space repetition
Right.
stuff. And then I got a little bit. There was a period when I was quite enthused by Ryan Holiday and Robert Greene, the index card system. So they had so
I
like
don't know that.
like all the books that you read and everything, like you should summarize into index cards and then just like review them. So basically you have this repository of like physical repository of knowledge stored in these index cards. So I did that for a little while, but I think you're right, like to also add the whole public component, because then it also kind of serves because which for I think for junior developers is quite difficult to get that whole authority thing going on for them. And like if you've learned something and you wrote it in a coherent, humorous, memorable way, like you don't even have to be the expert, but like you can be the person that just recently learned this and knows how to explain it. Because I think also the whole, like we sometimes forget that people that are experts are not necessarily good teachers. So
Yeah.
like to be a good explainer, so like learn something and share it, and like you said, it also that way you kind of filter out your misconceptions, or like people also are very keen to point you to like extra resources or other things, and yeah, and then you can kind of like establish not just like one point of knowledge, but also all these kind of like a network of things and people that connect and other people. And yeah, I think it does make sense. So I've started doing because I'm not very good online, so but I'm quite a private person, which is funny, right? Because we are live right now, but I find it quite difficult to share. Like not like my Twitter is just my name. I'm quite like I don't like sharing too much like what I'm doing or so the whole idea of writing what I think was like, ugh. But now I write about what I learned, and that is easier because then people learn from me, and I really really enjoy teaching people. And yeah, I think it's such a yeah. I don't know. Do you still mentor people now?
I have never mentored people. I answer questions,
Yeah.
and then if they have more questions and if the relationship is good, I'll keep doing that. Um, I always like so people will like tag me on stuff, and then they'll ask for my opinion, and I'll give their opinion.
Yeah.
And usually, I'll try to like push them to the next step and the next step. And usually they don't take it up, but I'll notice when they do, and then I'm basically mentoring them, right?
Right.
But basically, I don't like this title of mentor. It's not it's a job that I don't want, right? Like I don't like it, yeah, it's just like if I can help you in a specific situation, then I will help you, and if I find that you're a good person to work with, I'll help you on other things as well. But I'm not like a mentor for life, right? I have my own shit going on, so I don't, I don't feel like, yeah, like people have reached out to me and asked me to like generally mentor them, and I
Really?
said just read my stuff, right? Like I put out a ton of stuff. It's not like if it helps one person, it will help multiple people, and I rather help multiple people. So that's kind of how I do things.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, mm, just a comment on the Anki thing. So I tried the Anki thing and I don't like it. So
Okay.
Anki
What
cards
don't
are
you
a lot of
like?
work, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's a lot of like question answer. And I think the moment you like write the question and the answer, you probably like remember it for quite a while. so it's good for like memorizing like stats. Like if you really need like to memorize pi, or like I don't know, like so Michael Nielsen is like a big proponent of Anki cards, and he's doing this like thing on quantum physics and quantum country, and so he's like incorporating Anki cards into his blog post. So like halfway through the blog post, he'll like stop and check your understanding of these things, and he's trying to explain fundamental basic concepts of physics.
Right.
That kind of thing, yes, Anki cards, right? But for me, like, um, if it's just like how to do X in Webpack, I put a blog post, and then if I need it, I'll search for it. That's my Anki card. I don't know. I don't like the Anki system because
I mean,
it's too small. It's too trivial.
Yeah,
I want to do for like a bigger thing.
it works really great, of course, with languages, right? Because it's just words.
Right,
What does
right.
it mean word?
Yeah,
What does it mean? Or like facts. And I know it's very, very popular with students of medicine because I guess they have to memorize a lot of bones and stuff. But I
Yeah,
so
those are great. Yeah.
what I tried it with was like my goal was to like things that I learned and I wanted to kind of remember that I learned. I put them there so it will be like facts or something. And the idea was that I would just have like this one huge um, database that I would review, let's say, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes a day. So those facts would maybe come like once I had like, I don't know, 2,000 things, 2,000 cards. Like I would very rarely get repetitions. So it was just for things that I really wanted to remember or to memorize. So not like I don't think for programming, maybe in the beginning it's good. Because I don't know, like to know what's an attribute or what's a property, like to know this basic stuff that everyone should know. Maybe that's good for that. But yeah, I think, yeah, not sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's as long as it's you have a system that's outside of your main human brain, I approve of that. It just doesn't have to be Anki cards itself.
Yeah. So
And then I also wanted to respond to the public thing. Like, so I always say that you can choose the degree to which you want to be public, right? It's not like you're completely private and then you're like open to sharing your food every day, with everybody.
yeah,
I think there's definitely, especially this is important for like vulnerable people, like like women in tech sometimes get harassed, and unfortunately that's just a reality of like online discourse, right?
Yeah.
And you have to protect yourself, and that's just normal. Like for example, like I know a lot of people, not a lot of people. I know some women who have stalkers, so they can never ever show their actual position because then they'll risk their personal safety. But that's fine. Like you don't have to share everything. I definitely share more, right? You don't have to be like me. I see some people, and some people do very well, only doing one thing. Like for women, I've been pointing out this person recently. Two person, Samantha Ming and Jessica Chan. So they'll put out like a very polished blog post, very polished product at the and share, and people can share that. But they don't really show you the work in progress. They just show you the end result. So that means you're the only like the final output is public, and that works for them.
Right.
And I've seen obviously I've seen guys do that as well. Like Steve Shoger is one
Yeah.
where like I have no idea what he does in his free time. I don't know where he is. I don't know like what else he's interested in. All I know is that he drops design tips on Twitter. That's it, and he does very, very well on that. So that's, I mean, this is the spectrum of how you want to do it, and it's really up to you. Like I want Twitter to make friends, right? So I definitely share a bit more about myself and people like that, and I get to learn about their life as well. But I also don't share. I don't share everything, right? I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about religion. I don't talk about the environment. Like it's very much tech and finance because I mix finance.
And so have you ever had any problems at all, like trolls or like just people being weird on Twitter, or never?
I have some people who just keep messaging me and I just never reply, and then they don't give up. So I don't know what to do with that. That's about it. I mean, I'm a guy, so I don't really get that much, problems. So I know it's different for women. So I just want to like say that there are women who have figured out how to live with it and still have a good time and still be a part of our community. And I think that's great, and I want there to be support for this. Like, it's not just women, it's also like LGBTQ and
Yeah.
like the other stuff, like underrepresented, like Black Twitter is also a thing. I think Black Twitter doesn't need support. Like, they're good. They're very strong, and they're very outspoken. So that's that's great. They just need support in jobs and representation in jobs. But I mean, I think just like, when it comes to being public, there's a spectrum, and you can choose what you're comfortable with. And if it's too much, you can back off. If you feel like you want to experiment, you can try it out. Like, try Twitch out for a while. You're not really risking that much. Like again, like, as long as you're not too tied up with your work, people can criticize your work. No big deal. Like, it's just one part of you, and you can get better at that. It's an easy thing to get better. So
I mean, if it was just a work thing, that would be okay. It's mostly the other stuff that is what bothers me. So, like you said, I think women in tech, we kind of have to adopt a slightly thicker skin and like, hey, yeah, maybe they didn't mean it like that. Like, benefit of the doubt, and it's sometimes a bit tricky. And obviously there's a reason. Like, why diversity is an issue historically. Obviously there's also a reason, but just sometimes, yeah, it can be a bit hostile or just uncomfortable, and yeah, tricky to navigate.
like, look, like, yeah, there's a lot of tools, and there's a lot of the rest of us in the community who will come to your defense, right? So
Yeah, that's true.
but for me, like, I'll block people, like,
Yeah,
the moment I see that they're like, you don't need them in your life. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yeah,
even like, I mean, you can reverse a block later on, but if they look like even like slightly weird, like, just block it and move on. Like,
okay.
your mental health is important. Yeah.
I know we've been going on for a little while, but I just like the last kind of set of questions, because you talk about, and I think your book is gonna mention that, the how to market yourself as a developer,
Yeah.
and
That did really well.
I know, like, you've just done like and I was just talking to my wife, and I said, like, I think you're one of the few people that would say, I'm gonna write a book, like, in the next couple of weeks or couple of months, and I believe that you will do that, because I feel a lot of people say these things, and then it just kind of fizzles out because it's difficult, it's discipline, it's like, ugh. But yeah, I'm sure you will do it. But yeah, so can you just talk about your upcoming book and your tips, and how to, especially for people that are not yet blogging or are not established on Twitter or anywhere, how do you go about doing that? Like, what's
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say that the only reason that people believe that I can write a book like that is because I've been blogging for a few years, right?
Yeah.
So you earn that trust by showing that I've basically done it already. And I now I have to, like, assemble it into a polished product, and like, write a bit more extra stuff, update, essays, and just like tie everything together and make it into a finished product. In terms of like the marketing thing, this essay was really hard to write because I don't feel so I went to business school for my undergrad, and marketing was actually my worst subject. I got a C in that, whereas I was like a B and A, and everything else. I think the problem was that actually, I think the problem was with the business school. Like, they were teaching kind of old school marketing, like, what are the four P's of marketing, like price, product placement, that kind of thing. And then it was very US centric as well, and I'm not American, and then that was another issue. But like, I think marketing yourself is a very different, I guess, skill set from like traditional marketing, where it's a lot of like authenticity, and combining your skills together with like packaging yourself in the right way so that people can remember you and share you and understand what you're about and how people can call upon you. So basically I summed it up into this formula where it's like personal brand plus domain plus business value or tech skill, and then you combine that, and then you market yourself in public or at work. Uh, it's not a very catchy thing, which is funny, but that's those are all the main five aspects which I wanted to touch on. And I think for people who are just starting out in their careers, especially they're trying to get their first jobs and their first or like their next job after being a junior dev, I think there's a lot of advice out there on marketing yourself that basically says market your business value, right? Like I reduce costs on X and I triple revenue on Y and all that. Unfortunately, like that's not very helpful to people. That's not very helpful for juniors because you haven't had that impact yet. And really, you're trying to market to other devs and saying like, I'm a dev that you can work with. So essentially, instead of marketing business value, you're marketing your tech skills, your coding skills, and that can be that's mostly like people think about like a portfolio, but really like portfolio is very visual oriented, and it biases you to go broad. And if you're not a design slash front end person, then that's not very helpful, right? Like let's say you want to go more into back end, and say you want to go more into like JS infrastructure, which I basically consider myself a JS infra guy. There's nothing to show. There's no visual thing to see. So essentially, what I was saying was like basically it's more important to have proof of work, which is like a cryptocurrency kind of type of idea, than it is to have a portfolio. So a proof of work, and this happened recently in my interview when I was interviewing. Is basically like I was interviewing and I was in front of this guy who like didn't know who I was, and I was mentioning some work that I did, and he literally he pulled out his laptop in front of me and Googled me in front of me, and I wasn't ready for that. I was like, I don't know how this will look, I've never Googled that part, but it turned out well because I learned in public and I put my work out there, and so like he was instantly able, and not only that, he was also able to see that other people had checked the work, like they'll start the project, they'll I had good documentation. Like it's just like it's all this work up front, right, that nobody sees. And then at some point in time when it really matters, like someone is trying to hire you or something, they'll pull you up and they'll check you out in like 2 minutes. And within that 2 minutes, they can really kind of tell, right? What kind of dev you are. And it's all everything you do is kind of up to that point because that's where you really get the value. So it's kind of like a hashing algorithm it's like a one-way hash, right? Like it's like you do a bunch of work. And then you hash it, and then it's a very fast algorithm that says like, okay, here's the checksum, and here's like this person is who they say they are in terms of their ability of skill, and you just want to be able to prove that. So that's very abstract, but basically in terms of doing tech skills, like you want to prove that you can do cool stuff. Right. You want to prove that like and some people don't care. Whether like they just want it to be cool. They don't care what language, they don't care what framework. They just like just show me something impressive, right? And then they'll assume that once you've done something impressive, that you can transfer that. You can learn whatever you need to learn, which is true, right? Like most of the time you're doing something in a new job, you're pushing yourself in a new way. But others, like they may be more conservative, and they say like, this is a front end React job. I want to see you do projects with React, and if you don't have projects with React, goodbye. Unfortunately, like like a lot of people complain about that on Twitter. They're like, like fuck that, like you should hire for raw JS ability. But that's just how the job market is. Right. Like if you can't do it, someone else will. Yeah. Right. Sure. So so just like be aware of like what kind of jobs, what kind of people that you're applying for, and what they want, and then you can prove your work that way. So that's like the tech skill. Personal branding, I also mentioned a lot about that. Like you want to have you want to be able to basically have an elevator pitch for yourself, like a little bit of who you are and a little bit of what you're interested in, what you're about. Having consistent picture and a professional picture that you can use everywhere is a big asset, because people it really short circuit your rational thinking. Like people feel like they know me because they see my profile pic, right? But they see that way more than they see my actual face. And so that they actually that thing is actually more real than me. So it's worth investing in that profile and making sure it looks as good as possible. And that's your business card, right? Like we don't have business card anymore these days, but that's your business card online. Is that thing. And so you want to put you present yourself and present the things that you're interested in, so that people can come find you and reach out to you with opportunities for the stuff that you're interested in. And then finally, like the domain piece, like it's really about like picking something and just owning that, and being the person who owns that. I think once people can basically make fun of you, like one of the things I said in that thread was like, if they can make a meme out of you, you have a personal brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, those are the main three inputs, and then there's marketing yourself in public and at work, that's really when you have assembled all the raw ingredients and you're ready to go out.
I shared the link in chat as well. And when did you say your book is going to be published? You say?
The original goal was 2 weeks. But I'm realizing that like I just write a lot, and I spend a lot of time writing. So if I want so that marketing post took about 3 days to draft and edit and post, and that's one chapter, and I have about 50 chapters planned. So that's a lot of chapters. So the original goal was to put it up, put like a V1 out in 2 weeks, and then expand upon it over time, like have multiple versions, right? It's kind of like a JavaScript library in that sense. But I think I'm probably going to delay it because I don't think I would be happy putting out something that isn't finished. Fortunately, I didn't promise a delivery date in the original presale, so
smart.
I can go back on my my thing, but I have to finish it at some point because I'm going to start my new job. So this is like, I wanted to do this because I'm not doing anything right now, and not that many people give advice like this to early career devs. So I wanted to like basically like put down all my thoughts now, and then I'll be free to like do other stuff in future. Like basically I want to learn. I'm basically pivoting from front end dev to cloud. So I want to learn more cloud stuff, and so I'll be putting out a lot more content on like DynamoDB and like serverless framework and like Lambda and serverless functions and stuff like that. And I think those that's kind of like my progression in interest, starting from front end and then moving increasingly more backward. But I always have a soft spot for front end.
Wow. Okay, it's been an hour. So last question is there anything else that you wanted to add? Anything that you want people to know about you? And what's the best way to find you, reach you?
Oh, great. If people haven't read the Learn in Public philosophy, I have a couple of talks and a blog post. So it's on Swyx.io/Learn in Public. That's one word. And I think I mean, people can find me online on twitter.com/Swyx. That's about it. There's a second question somewhere.
No, I think that's that's okay.